where a woman arrives with nothing but hope. The town appeared first as a smudge of dust against the horizon, as if the land itself had grown tired and decided to rest there. Wooden buildings leaned into one another for balance. The wind moved freely, carrying grit, old promises, and the smell of dry earth baked too long by the sun. The stagecoach slowed with a tired groan. Wheels complained. Horses snorted. And then she stepped down. She was careful with her footing, as though the ground might change its mind and pull away. Her dress had once been blue, long before the road had rubbed its color thin. A small carpet bag hung from her hand, light enough to tell its own story. Everything she owned could be lifted without strain. She stood still for a moment, letting the town look at her before she looked back. Her shoulders were straight. Not proud, not defiant, just steady. The kind of steadiness learned early when leaning became a luxury. Her eyes moved slowly, taking in doors that were closed, windows that watched, and a sky that felt much bigger than the one she had left behind. This was the place named in the letter. The handwriting had been neat, almost hopeful. Words chosen carefully. A ranch, a home, a husband who needed a wife. It had sounded like something solid, something finished. She had held that letter on long nights, folded and unfolded it until the creases softened. She had whispered it to herself when the train rattled too hard, when strangers stared too long, when doubt crept in like cold through a cracked wall. Now the letter lived quietly in her pocket, as if it already knew what was coming. Tea arrived without ceremony. Boots heavy on the dirt, hat pulled low. A man built from sharp lines and narrower expectations. He did not smile, did not offer his hand. His eyes moved over her the way a farmer looks at a fence post that's leaning, measuring usefulness, calculating effort. This was the man who had sent for her. He said her name once, testing it, as though it might disappoint him if spoken aloud. Then he nodded toward the road behind her. No greeting, no welcome, only an unspoken question of why she looked the way she did, why she was smaller than imagined, quieter than hoped. She felt it immediately. That shift in the air, the moment when a dream begins to shrink. The walk to the ranch was short, but it felt long. Dust clung to her shoes. The house came into view, sturdy and plain. Whitewashed boards. A porch worn smooth by years of pacing and waiting. It looked like shelter. It looked like the kind of place where evenings ended in warmth. She slowed without meaning to. He stopped at the door. The key turned in his hand, not the lock. He cleared his throat. Words came out stiff, like they had never learned how to sit comfortably together. This was not what he had expected. He said it plainly. He needed a woman who could work hard, speak less, take up little space. He said things about expense and inconvenience, about how arrangements could be reconsidered. She listened without interrupting. She had learned long ago that silence sometimes kept a person safe. When he finished, he looked at her as though waiting for an argument. A plea. Tears, perhaps. Instead, she glanced past him at the house. The windows reflected the sky. The porch rail caught the sun just right. For a moment, something warm rose in her chest, then settled back down. She spoke softly. Her voice carried no accusation. She said she could sleep in the barn. The words fell between them and stayed there. The barn stood a short distance away, red paint peeling like tired skin. It smelled of hay and animals and old summers. To her, it smelled like survival, like a place where no one would be disappointed by her presence. She did not say it was only for a night, did not promise to improve, did not bargain. She only offered the solution she had learned best. Take less, need less, be less troubled. He stared at her, something tightening in his jaw. Then he shook his head once. No, the word was final, flat, clean. He turned the key. The lock caught. The sound echoed louder than it should have. She did not flinch. She nodded, once, accepting the shape of things. Her hands trembled only after she turned away. He did not see that part. The walk to the barn was slow. The sun dipped lower, painting the land in gold and shadow. Crickets began their evening song, unaware of the small heartbreak unfolding among them. Inside, the barn was quiet but not unkind. She chose a corner away from the animals, spread her thin blanket, and sat for a moment before lying down. Dust floated in the lantern light like tiny stars. She watched them settle. She thought of all the places she had slept that were not meant for rest. Floors, wagons, benches. This was not the worst of them. Outside, The house stood darkening against the sky. Inside it, warmth waited and used. She lay down fully then, pulling the blanket close, listening to the slow breathing of the animals. Her eyes stayed open longer than necessary. Somewhere deep inside her, a quiet resolve formed. Not anger, not despair, just the understanding that this land, like life, would not offer shelter freely, and that if she was to stay, it would be on her own terms, however small they seemed. The wind moved through the cracks of the barn, gentle but persistent, and the night settled in, carrying with it the first question of what kind of home this would become. The house that stayed closed, and the man who noticed morning arrived without asking permission. Light slipped through the broken slats of the barn and laid itself gently across her face, as if unsure she wished to be woken. She opened her eyes slowly. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then the smell of hay and wood brought it back, quiet and clear. She sat up, smoothing her dress the way a guest might, even though there was no one to see. Outside, the land stretched awake. Roosters argued with the dawn. Somewhere, a bucket clanged. Life continued, indifferent and dependable. She folded her blanket neatly and set it aside. Small habits mattered. They reminded her she still belonged to herself, by the time the sun rose higher. She was already moving. She carried water without being asked, swept the barn floor, mended a loose strap on a harness she had noticed the night before. Her hands knew work the way other hands knew music. There was no bitterness in it, only rhythm. The house remained closed. Its windows watched her. Its door stayed firm in its frame. She did not approach it again. Some refusals, once spoken, deserved respect. He passed her once, then twice. The man who had sent for her kept his eyes forward, as if looking might cost him something. When he spoke, it was only to give instruction. His voice never softened. He addressed her as one might address weather. Necessary, inconvenient, beyond control. At meals, she waited until last. If there was little, she took less. If there was nothing, she said nothing at all. The hired hand noticed. So did the older woman from the neighboring plot, who came by with eggs twice a week. The woman's eyes lingered on her longer than politeness required. That woman had lived long enough to recognize quiet endurance. It looked familiar. The days settled into pattern. Dust, Sunday work, silence. At night, the barn welcomed her back without question. She learned the sounds of it. The sigh of settling wood. The soft shifting of animals. It was not warmth, but it was shelter. Then, one afternoon, another presence entered the land. He came on horseback, slow and unannounced. A man shaped by restraint rather than force. His clothes were plain. His posture carried no need to impress. He dismounted carefully, as though he believed the ground deserved consideration. That he spoke to the rancher first. Their exchange was brief, practical. When the conversation ended, the newcomer's gaze drifted, unhurried, and found her near the fence. She felt it without looking. That sense of being seen, not measured. When she finally raised her eyes, he tipped his hat slightly, not greeting her as property, not overlooking her as nuisance. Just acknowledgement, simple and sincere. That was all, but it stayed with her longer than it should have. Over the following days, he appeared now and then, always with reason. A tool returned, a question asked. He spoke little, but when he did, his words landed gently, as if he had learned that volume was not the same as strength. Once, he noticed her hands trembling in the early cold. The next morning, a blanket appeared near the barn door, thicker than the one she owned. Left without explanation, she did not thank him. He did not ask her to. Another time, he poured her coffee before she could refuse, set the cup near her, and walked away. The steam curled into the air, carrying a warmth she had not realized she missed. There was no invitation hidden in these gestures. No claim, no expectation. Only care, offered the way one offers shade on a hot day. The man who owned the house grew quieter as this happened. His eyes sharpened. His steps grew heavier. He did not like the way the land was beginning to notice her. Did not like how his own smallness showed more clearly beside her quiet grace. She felt the tension, but did not feed it. She continued as she had, working, listening, enduring. Yet something inside her began to loosen. Just a little. She found herself looking up when the second man's horse approached. Not with hope. Not yet. Just awareness. like a flower turning toward light without knowing why. One evening, as the sun burned low and red, she sat on the barn steps, watching dust settle into gold. The second man stood a short distance away, not intruding. They shared the silence like a language both understood. He spoke then, softly, about the land, about how it gave when treated gently, how forcing it only led to loss. She listened. When he finished, she nodded once. That night, lying in the barn, she realized something had changed. Not in the world around her. The door was still locked, the house still closed, but inside her, a small space had opened. A place where kindness could live without fear. And for the first time since arriving, she slept without bracing herself for the morning. What grows when kindness is given time? The seasons did not announce themselves. They never did. They arrived the way healing often does, quietly, without ceremony, changing things while no one was watching. The dust thinned. The mornings cooled. The land breathed differently. She noticed it in her bones before she noticed it in the sky. Her days continued much the same. Work, silence, small kindnesses given and received without name. But beneath the surface, something steady was taking root. Not joy, not yet. Something deeper. The sense that she no longer had to disappear to survive. The second man came more often now, though never without purpose. Sometimes he brought news. Sometimes he brought nothing at all. He never stayed too long. Never lingered in ways that would invite rumor or discomfort. He understood space. Understood how fragile trust could be when it had once been broken. They spoke of simple things. Weather, horses, the way certain fields responded better to patience than force. He listened when she spoke, really listened, as though her words were not interruptions but gifts. When she fell quiet, he did not rush to fill the space that in those pauses. Something gentle passed between them. Recognition, familiarity, a shared understanding of loss that did not need to be unpacked. She told him, once, about the road, about places she had been that never meant to keep her. She did not tell him everything. She did not need to. He did not ask for more than she offered. He spoke of his own past in fragments. A home once full, a silence that followed. He said it without bitterness. Just truth, laid carefully on the ground between them. The barn no longer felt like punishment. It felt temporary. That distinction mattered. The man who owned the house felt the shift before he could name it. He saw the way she stood straighter now, the way her eyes no longer dropped as quickly. He heard the low murmur of conversation that did not include him. It unsettled him. His words grew sharper, his instructions more frequent. He reminded her of her place, as if repeating it might make it real again. She accepted the work, but something inside her no longer bowed. One evening, he spoke too loudly, said too much, accused her of ingratitude, of thinking herself above what she was given. The words struck not because they were new, but because they were suddenly untrue. She stood there, hands still, eyes steady. When she spoke, her voice did not tremble. She said she had never asked for more than shelter, never taken what was not offered. She said this life was not what had been promised, and she would not pretend otherwise. The air held its breath. He had no answer that did not expose him. So he turned away. That night, she packed her bag, the same small carpet bag that had arrived with her. It did not take long. Her life had never been heavy with things. The barn was quiet as she folded the blanket one last time. She rested her hand against the wood, feeling the place that had held her when nothing else would. Gratitude moved through her, calm and sincere. At dawn, she stepped away from the ranch. She did not look back at the house. The second man was waiting near the fence, as if he had known. He did not ask where she was going. He only asked if she would like company for part of the way. They walked side by side, the land stretching open before them. No urgency, no promises spoken too soon. When they reached his place, he stopped. The house there was modest, the door worn but open. He did not gesture grandly, did not make an offer dressed in certainty. He simply stepped aside. The choice was hers. She crossed the threshold slowly, as though learning a new language. Inside, the air was warm, not just from the fire, but from the absence of fear. She did not cry. She breathed. And in that quiet moment, she understood something that would stay with her forever. Kindness, when given time, does not rescue. It restores, and she was ready to be whole again. The door that finally opened the house did not change all at once. It remained modest, a little worn at the edges, shaped by years of use and quiet endurance. But to her, it felt vast, not because of its size, but because nothing in it asked her to shrink. Morning light found its way through clean windows and rested on the table, where she learned the comfort of sitting without hurry. The kettle sang softly. The fire stayed low and steady. No one watched her steps. No one counted her worth by how little space she took. The man moved through the house with the same care he carried everywhere else. He never assumed, never claimed. He asked before he touched anything that belonged to her, even silence. When he spoke, it was with honesty, not expectation. Love did not arrive like a storm. It came the way the land healed after drought. Slowly, patiently, with roots growing deep where no one thought anything could survive. They worked side by side, shared meals that felt earned, not rationed. On cold evenings, they sat near the fire without filling the quiet, letting the day settle naturally between them. Trust grew there, in those spaces where nothing was demanded. Word traveled, as it always did. The older neighbor woman came by again, this time with a smile that stayed. She saw what had taken shape and nodded, as though something had been set right in the world. The hired hand passed once and tipped his hat, respect plain in the small gesture. The land responded too. Crops held, animals calmed. The house seemed to breathe easier, as if it had been waiting for the right kind of living to begin. The man who had locked his door did not come often after that. When he did, his eyes lingered on what he had lost without ever holding. He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Some lessons did not need witnesses. They needed solitude. One evening, as the sun lowered itself carefully behind the hills, she stood at the doorway of her new home, not guarding it, not afraid it might be taken, simply standing, present in a life that finally fit. She realized then that home was never the structure. It was the safety of being seen, the relief of being allowed to rest, the quiet knowing that you would not be sent away when you were most yourself. She had crossed miles believing she needed to be chosen. Now she understood something truer. She had needed a place where she could choose herself. The man stood beside her, close but not crowding. Their shoulders touched lightly, enough to promise warmth without pressure. Ahead of them, the land stretched open and honest, full of work yet to be done and days yet to be lived. Nothing was perfect, but it was real, and it was kind. If this story has reached you, let it sit with you for a moment. Let it remind you that closed doors are not always rejection. Sometimes they are protection, guiding you toward a life that will not ask you to disappear to belong. If you've ever waited in the cold, ever offered less just to stay, know this. There is a place where your presence will be welcomed without condition. Thank you for walking this road. If this story stirred something in you, leave a sign of it. Like the tale, share a word in the comments. Subscribe so more quiet stories like this can find you. And tell us, from where in the world are you listening to this tonight?